bring on the Messiah, and they hope Armageddon and the end of the world. Well, I think the United States Supreme Court should hear argument that not one American dime can be used constitutionally for that project. Okay, it's high time. Cut it off. These people mean us real harm. And I'm not going to dilate about what their Muslim brothers say about us. When the Quran does not say that you may be killed for changing your religion, but the Hadith, the so-called sayings of the Prophet, which are taken just as seriously, do say that. So when someone says, I'm a Muslim, and I'm telling you, Mr. Rushdie, if you apostatize from this faith, you're dead, he's not misquoting the texts. Sir, he's not. He's quoting them accurately. I think, I'll phrase it as understatedly as I can, I think we could do without a lot of this. There's a very famous parable in the New Testament where the alleged Jesus of Nazareth tells a story about a man from Samaria, we call him the Good Samaritan, who, finding a fellow creature in enormous distress and pain, goes well out of his way to alleviate his suffering and to follow up to make sure that his sympathy hasn't been a waste of time, to do the aftercare, if you like. Well, we know one thing about this person from Samaria. He cannot have been a Christian. Right? Jesus is telling this story about someone he's heard of, who acted, as far as we know, from no other prompting with elementary human solidarity. What other prompting do we need? Our species would not have survived. We wouldn't be met here if we didn't have, as well as many selfish instincts, the need, and often for our own sake, to be of use to others, to combine with them, to take an interest in them, to care for them, and to worry when they're in pain. No supernatural authority, as with the civil rights movement, is required for this. Morality comes from us. Religion claims to have invented it on our behalf. Then, okay, another example from the Older Testament. Is it really to be believed that until they got to the foot of Mount Sinai, the followers of Moses believed that up till then, adultery, murder, theft, and perjury were okay? They're suddenly told, oh, hey, we got some new ideas for you. I don't think so. The golden rule is something you don't have to teach a child. There's no need to say, and if you don't follow this rule, you'll burn in hell forever. That's immoral teaching. When you see something otherwise surprising to you, such as a good person acting in a wicked manner, it's very often because they believe they're under divine orders to do so. Stephen Weinberg puts it very well. He says, left to themselves, evil people will do evil things and good people will try and do good things. If you want a good person to do a wicked thing, that takes religion. For example, I simply do not believe that my Palestinian friends I've known for years think that to blow yourself up outside an orphanage is a moral act, or inside one is a moral act, or in an old people's home in Netanya is a moral action. That anything in their nature makes them think this. But their mullahs tell them that it is, and that the person doing this is a hero. I do not think that any person looking at a newborn baby would think, how wonderful, what a gift, but now just let's start sawing away at its genitalia with a sharp stone. Who would give them that idea if not the godly? And what kind of argument from design is this? Babies are not born beautiful, they're born ugly. They need to be sawn a bit because the handiwork of God is such garbage. Well, honestly, this is what I mean when I say that those who think there's any connection between ethics and religion have all their work still ahead of them, and after thousands of years still have it all ahead of them more and more. So when you say you've had this confirming emotion in your own life, of course I would not be so presumptuous as to challenge you. Indeed, I believe people when they say that they have experienced miracles. I believe that they think that they have. I think I'm obliged to credit them if it comes to that. As long as they keep it to, if you like, if I can put it like this, modestly as I dare, to themselves. If I believe that I was saved because once a baby boy was born and before mutilated, was made the extraordinary discovery that he'd escaped the female birth canal. Mother was a virgin, or at least her birth canal was only one way. Thus I was a sorry thing, by the way, religion's distaste for these regions, don't you find? and something to put you on your guard. Suppose I thought, okay, now I know that must prove his teachings are true, which it doesn't seem to me that they do, but suppose I did, and I'm going to be saved by it. I think that was a wonderful secret. It would make me happy. It should make me happy. It doesn't make people happy. They can't be happy till I believe it too. My children must be taught this stuff. No, sir, no ma'am, no day, no way, no shape, no form. You keep your illusion private. I think it was David Hume who put it slightly vulgarly. This was again about the virgin birth, I think. Which is more likely, that the whole natural order is suspended, or that a Jewish minx should tell a lie? Actually, secular criminality on the political level wasn't really possible until pretty much the late 18th century, because the religious monopoly on violence and cruelty and torture and slavery and so on was so intense. This is the first for me. I've never yet met someone in holy orders who has said that the words of the holy books are nothing to do with God. I know there's a lot of laxity in the churches these days, and I've been trying to encourage it, but I mean, it seems to me I could have been pushing at a slightly more well-defended door.
Should we, normal, sane Americans, continue to be so bedazzled by a bespoke, off-cam superficialist who just wants the U.S. to pick up the many disastrous pieces of the British Empire, and whose understanding of God is much shorter than his penis?
I don't mind.
Assuming that that's not a question, let's try another one.
Well, I thought it sounded interrogative. I mean, I don't want anyone to think I'm dodging anything, is all. So I'm one of those who Pascal is actually thinking about, or was thinking about when he wrote. He wrote to the person who is so made that he cannot believe. There are millions of us. There always have been. There are now. There are going to be many more of us in the future. We're just a little bit fed up of being treated like freaks in American culture. The questions that they come and ask these chaplains are, why? Why does it happen that the nicest guy in my unit just took a round through the throat, you know, that I've just been at this village where all the children have been killed, and where you can fill in this for yourself. Why? That's what the question, isn't it? Well, have you ever heard any spokesman of any religion give an answer to that question? They've had thousands of years to think about it. No, they haven't come up with that question at all. Unless to say, as they used to when it was a plague or a war or a tsunami, well, it's probably a sign of sin. You've been punished. The Archbishop of Canterbury in England 2 years ago says he really worries how God could be so mean as to unleash a tidal wave towards Christmas time in Asia. You can't believe you're listening to this stuff. Now, if you ask me, okay, I'll say, why did this happen? Why did the best guy I know get cancer of the throat or get mugged or slaughtered or whatever it was? I'll say, because we belong to an imperfectly evolved species where the adrenaline glands are too big, the prefrontal lobes are too small, and we bear every sign of the stamp of our lowly origin. And only by realizing the fact that we are mammals are we likely to be able to talk any sense about it. And if you say, well, why did that city fall down or be overcome by waves, or that volcano kill all those children, I say, well, hate to break it to you, but we live on a cooling planet whose crust hasn't quite settled yet, and these are to be expected. And there is no other explanation for them, and don't believe anyone who says there is. Well, this is not perhaps perfect ethical instruction, but it does conform to the Hippocratic injunction, prima non nocere. At least I'm not lying to these people. At least what I say can do them no harm, and at least it cannot increase the illusions they already have. And usually when you go to that village and ask why have the children been killed, it's because someone who believed in God thought that they had it coming.
My question is to Christopher is how you can justify why you take something away from people, from 95, that gives meaning to 95% of the American people, and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people.
Well, What an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so, as Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. I'm not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you. I do notice that Christians or other believers tend to say, if a baby falls 25 floors and lands with a bounce on the lawn and is unharmed, they attribute it to divine intervention, and if it falls 2 feet off a table and cracks its skull and dies, they just say that's bad luck. If you're going to be a serious grown-up person and appear to defend the Catholic Church in public in front of an educated and literate audience, you simply have to start by making a great number of heartfelt apologies and requests for contrition and forgiveness. Now, you might ask, you're fully entitled to ask, brothers and sisters, who am I to say that? Well, in the Jubilee Millennium year of 2000, the Vatican spokesman, Bishop Piero Marini, said, explaining a whole sermon of apology given by His Holiness the Pope, that was supposed to cover the entire history of the Church in its Jubilee year, that I'll quote Bishop Marini directly, said, given the number of sins we've committed in the course of 20 centuries, reference to them must necessarily be rather summary. Well, I think Bishop Marini had that just about right. I'll have to be summary too, but I think he said just about the least of it. His Holiness on that occasion, it was March the 12th, 2000, if you wish to look it up, begged forgiveness for, among some other things, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the persecution of the Jewish people, injustice towards women, that's half the human race right there, and the forced conversion of indigenous peoples, especially in South America. And that followed a whole series of preceding apologies, or apologies, I would say, of a kind, made by the late Pope John Paul, who, it troubles me not at all to say, was a very impressive and serious human being. It followed no less than 94, count them, public recognitions on his part of appalling crime and error and cruelty and stupidity and offences to the free intelligence, ranging from, I shall be summary, like Bishop Marini, the African slave trade, apologized for in 1995, the admission that Galileo was right about the relationship between the sun and the earth and other orbs, which came in 1992, one might add, and I won't say, it's too easy to say better late than never, here, said it. To violence and torture, legalized torture. Torture was legalized and institutionalized by the Roman Pontiff during the Counter-Reformation. That came in 1995. And for silence during Hitler's final solution, or Shoah, as well as, in 1999, coming in just under the Millennium Jubilee wire, an apology for the burning alive in the main square of Prague of the great Czech Protestant Jan Hus. Since that big fiesta of forgiveness that began in, or culminated, I might say, in 2000, fiesta of forgiveness, fiesta of asking for it, the papacy is also asked to be forgiven for the sack of Constantinople and the massacre of Byzantine Christianity in April 1204 as part of the Fourth Crusade, the anathema on all Eastern Orthodox Christians as unbelievers, heretics, and people dwelling outside the health of the Church was lifted only in 1964. I call your attention to that. He also expressed sorrow about the murder and forced conversion of Serbian Orthodox Christians in the Balkans during the Second World War. And it doesn't end there. There are smaller but significant, equally significant, avowals of a very bad conscience. These have included regret for the rape and the torture of orphans and other children in church-run schools in almost every country on earth, from Ireland to Australia. We still await a more direct admission. For example, I give some suggestions of my own while we're at it. I would like them to take back the Concordat made with Adolf Hitler, the first treaty he ever signed, giving the church a monopoly over education in Germany in exchange for the dissolution of the Catholic Centre Party to give the Nazi Party a clear run. I'd have apologized for the Lateran Pact with Mussolini, myself, also the first treaty ever signed by that fascist dictator. I would also think I'd want to reconsider the fact that Father Tiso, head of the Nazi puppet state in Slovakia, was a priest in holy orders. That the Croatian fascist puppet state, the Ustaša state of Ante Pavelic, was also operating under full clerical protection and disguise, as was the regime of General Franco and the dictator Antonio Salazar. And I really think I would beg forgiveness for this. I don't think the German church should have asked Hitler's birthday to be celebrated from the pulpit every year until he died. These are very serious matters, and they're not to be laughed off by references to the occasional work of Catholic charities. But I draw your attention not just to the apologies, ladies and gentlemen, but to the evasive and euphemistic form that they take. Joseph Ratzinger, the current Pope, considered by some, by Catholics, to be the Vicar of Christ on earth, says of the Indians who were massacred in the course of conversion in Brazil, after the apology had been made to them, he said, nonetheless, it must be remembered that before we came to convert them, they were silently awaiting the arrival of the church. I don't think that's a very genuine kind of apology to you. When I say child abuse was institutional, how dare I say so? How can I prove it? How can I prove such a thing? Well, I'll ask His Grace, and I'll ask Anne Widdecombe. Where is Cardinal Bernard Law now? Where is he? Where is the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston, whose resignation was indignantly demanded, finally, by 50 members of the church and by the whole laity of Massachusetts, who also demanded his prosecution for the promotion and protection and covering up and apology for and defense of people whose crimes against children are too revolting to specify. And he's not in the jurisdiction of Massachusetts now, as perhaps you know. He's the Supreme Vicar of the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome, personally appointed by the Pope to that as well as many other important sinecures. And in 2005, this man, a fugitive from justice and from complicity in the filthiest crime that it's possible for a human being to imagine, was one of those voting in conclave to decide who the next Vicar of Christ on earth will be. I don't know. I think I'd like to hear a bit more shame about this. I think I'd like to see a bit more confrontation with the reality of the business. Anti-Semitism was preached as an official doctrine of the church until 1964. Do you think that might have something to do with public opinion in Austria and Bavaria and Poland and Lithuania? That the Jewish people were accused collectively as a people of deicide, of the crime of the murder of God in the figure of Jesus of Nazareth. And that anathema on them was not lifted until 64, well after the perpetrators of the Holocaust had stood trial in secular courts and been rightly punished for their actions. How can this church say it has any moral superiority? It has difficulty catching up to what ordinary people regard as common moral and ethical sense, and it still can't make itself apologize properly, and I'll tell you why. Because, and I'll quote again from the encyclicals, it is said of the Crusades, of the complicity with the Holocaust, of the political and diplomatic alliance with fascism, of all of these things, it is said, well, violence was committed, but I'll stress this, I'll underline it, I'll quote directly, in the service of the truth. So how is an apology possible? How is any understanding or undertaking or firm purpose of amendment to be allowed when the original sin, so to say, the radix malorum, the fons et origo, the problem in the first place, is the belief on the part of this church that it does possess a truth that we don't have, and it does have a God-given right, a warrant, a mandate of heaven to tell other people what to do, not just in their public, but in their private lives. And until that is changed, till that fantastic and sinister and non-founded claim is changed, these crimes will go on repeating themselves, being partially denied, partially admitted when it's too late to do anything else, and covered up. I think that there will be an apology for what happened in Rwanda, the most Catholic country in Africa, one of the most Catholic countries in the world, where priests and nuns and bishops are on trial for inciting from their pulpits and on the church's radio stations and newspapers the massacre of their brothers and sisters. And the papacy was silent on this appalling occasion, and everyone in Rwanda knows it. And there hasn't yet been a properly written apology for that disgrace. Staying in Africa, I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way. I say it in the presence of His grace, and I say it to His face. The preachings of His church are responsible for the death and suffering and misery of millions of His brother and sister Africans, and He should apologize for it. He should show some shame. Fourth, for condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church, you're born in sin. He's not being condemned for what he does, he's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join our church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church. I don't wish any ill on any fellow primate or mammal of mine, even if this primate or mammal claims to be a primate in possession of a secret that's denied to me. I can forgive even that because I live in a country where their reign doesn't run, their writ doesn't apply, and they can't burn me and silence me and censor me any more than they can tell my wife that she can't use contraception, or any more than they can really tell Stephen that he's a beast. So I don't at all look forward to the death of Joseph Ratzinger. I don't. Or any other pope, not really, except for one tiny reason which I ought to confess and share with you. When he dies, there's quite a long interval till the conclave can meet. Maybe Cardinal Law will still be on it, to pick another pope. Sometimes it goes on for months till they get the white smoke. And for that whole time, that whole interval, it's a delicious, lucid interlude, there isn't anyone on earth who claims to be infallible. Isn't that nice? All I want to propose in closing is this, that if the human species is to rise to the full height that's demanded by its dignity and by its intelligence, we must all of us move to a state of affairs where that condition is permanent. And I think we should get on with it. Okay, thank you for having me. The efforts of the missionary church in the third world mean more people die, not less. It's as simple as that. More famine, more disease, more ignorance, more random and avoidable death. To the Holocaust, sir, that the church preached that the Jewish people were collectively responsible for the death of Christ until 1964, till nearly 20 years after the Nuremberg trials, may or may not have something to do with the availability of a reservoir of anti-Jewish hatred in countries like Poland, Spain, Italy, Germany, Austria, and elsewhere. I think it does have something to do with it, okay? The Ten Commandments, 3 of them are awe-inspiring. They're about being afraid of a totalitarian figure. 3 of them are ordinary morality. We know of no code of ethics ever found, and the Archbishop bears me out on this, that recommends murder, theft, or perjury. Putting adultery on the same level as that may not be morally advisable. Saying that covetousness should be considered in the same light as a crime, in other words, a thought crime. You're condemned now for something you're thinking, and it may be something that leads you to enterprise and emulation. That's forbidden too. That's very, very iffy, it seems to me, and there's a very iffy part of it which lumps those you mustn't covet in with the animals and the chattels and your property, and those who it lumps in are your womenfolk. Questions. Amazing. I asked, where is Cardinal Law, Bernard Law, and why? I have an authority here. He ducks the question. Anne Widdecombe Sorry, I've got one more thing to say about that. He also says that the church advises against homosexuality. It teaches against it. No, it doesn't. Any more than it teaches against divorce or contraception. Where it can, it bans these things and punishes them and writes them into the criminal code. If all you were doing, sir, ma'am, were offering advice, we could probably be fine with it. No one, though they were asked repeatedly, would say whether they thought Stephen Fry, my friend, was in a state of mortal sin or not. They wouldn't tell you. Something about the question brought out their inner coward. Well, I say that homosexuality is not just a form of sex, it's a form of love, and it deserves our respect for that reason. That when my children were young, I'd have been proud to have Stephen as their babysitter, and I'd told them they were lucky. And if anyone came to my door as a babysitter wearing holy orders, I'd call first a cab and then the police. It used to be believed, I mean, the number of gods now it's infinite, and a new god is created almost every day by some cult or other, but it used to be that there was a belief that gods were in the trees, in the woods, in the springs, in the sea, in the clouds, and so forth. Polytheism of a kind. Then something a bit more polytheistic, like Olympus, where there was at least a location for the divine, but it was multifaceted. And then monotheism, getting it down to one. So I regard this as progress of a sort, because they're getting nearer the true figure all the time, where 99% of all species that have ever been on the planet have already gone extinct, leaving no descendants. All of this could be part of a plan. There is no way an atheist can prove it's not. But it's some plan, isn't it, with mass destruction, pitiless extermination, annihilation going on all the time, and all of this set in motion on a scale that's absolutely beyond our imagination, in order that the Pope can tell people not to jerk off. Look, they go out and proselytize very often. Now, and here's, I can't let your last answer go. Very often in the guise of charity. You notice how often that religion, rather than answer the questions that I've put, like how do you know there's a God, what evidence do you have for it, which you say, well, lots of good people do good things because they're religious. Well, let's take the most recent pressing case. Richard Dawkins and I and a few others, in the response to the Haiti earthquake, set up an emergency charity for people of non-belief to give to, because so many charitable organizations are in fact proselytizing groups. So we raised about $2 million in a weekend, and all that money goes straight. By the way, thank you. If you go to Richard's website, you can find out more about how to donate to this, because it's permanent. It's going to stay in being. All that money went straight to Doctors Without Borders, of course, and the International Red Cross, which, though it has a cross, isn't a religious organization. Both these organizations are already in Haiti. They're proven. None of the money goes to support any missionary activity. None. And the Scientologists and all the others who turned up in Haiti, and the people who turned up in Haiti to kidnap babies to convert them to their faith, and the Catholics who turned up and said, standing in the ruins of their own cathedral, with 250,000 Haitians buried under the rubble, said, God spoke here today, and you should listen to his message. Don't tell me that's good. Don't tell me that's good. That's wicked. It's proselytizing. It's proselytizing with the helpless, using them as objects of charity and conversion. It's lying to people. But there's also a lot of wrong to lie. It's wrong to lie to people. And it's giving them false hopes and false explanations for their plight. Now, we're not guilty of any of that. Despairing. I think despair is quite a good starting point myself. I mean, I think it's very good to know that we're born into a losing struggle. I think that the stoicism that comes from that and the reflection that comes from that is very useful. I'm not very impressed by people who say, well, I wish it wasn't true, so I'll try and act as if it isn't. It is true. Everything is governed by entropy and decline and annihilation and disaster. And you're born into a losing struggle, and because you're a mammal primate mammal, you know you are, and you know you're going to die, and that there'll be a lot of struggle and pain on the way. I don't want a world without anxiety and grief and pain and struggle. I can't get it. No one's saying that. But those who offer it to me, I spurn the gift. I don't want what you want. I don't want the feeling of eternal love and peace. Love and peace, very, very overrated in my view.
But how do we create, for those who aren't able or don't desire to walk around in despair or to walk around in irony, in a world that can bring plenty of despair? Try it, fine. But I think it's manifestly clear lots of people don't choose that. So what does atheism offer?
Well, it offers the chance of living without illusion, which I think, and it says that philosophy and literature will do a great deal more for you. There's a lot more morality in them. There's a lot more ethical discussion in Dostoevsky, say.
Who will present them in our society, in a real society? Who will present them in the way the creator is?
For now, I'm presenting.
There he is.
For now, I'm presenting. I can't do...
You're going to be very busy.
I can only appear in my own person here. I can even say that to some extent it works for me. This irony, I think, is tremendously useful, as is philosophy, especially the philosophy of Spinoza, especially in times of anguish. And the realization that there's no false consolation can actually cheer you up. But once you face the fact that you're born into a losing struggle, things immediately appear a great deal more manageable in some ways. That a person exists who would say, now that I don't believe in God, I'll stop giving money to charity. I don't care anymore. I don't think there is such a person. And if that were so, it would be a very strange religion that they've been professing.
Who will organize good works in the
Not only
absence
that,
of
but
religion?
why is it that in survey after survey, religious people do give more, and religious people watch less television and use drugs less and use alcohol less?
This is what religion is down to.
It has social utility.
It's very impressive to me.
Okay, good.
It's very often the first thing. When we debate with Catholics, they always change the subject to charity right away. With Jews, it's usually a little later.
You just said that they...
And with Muslims, it's
at the
all the time. Because what else can they don't want to defend their faith.
But you just said the opposite. You just said
they
that
don't want to
didn't believe you wouldn't do it.
defend their faith. They don't want to say, they feel uneasy talking about redemption, salvation, all this kind of thing. But look at the good work we do. If you talk to the Mormons, they'll say, you may not think much of Joseph Smith. And I say, you got that right. But, boy, you should see our missionaries in Peru.
The government will do the work if religion does not.
What has this got to do with the existence of God or the validity of religious claims? It has nothing to do with it.
Social
Which is
utility.
why it's always introduced as a time-wasting tactic.
Wait.
Like them. Religion and science can coexist in the same person, that's true. Now, I know Francis Collins. He writes brilliant on the genome, but if you've read C.S. Lewis, you don't need to read him on religion. It's unbelievably naive. Sir Isaac Newton was an alchemist, a very strong, if rather superstitious Christian. He thought the Pope was the Antichrist, might have been onto something there. But very weird, full of very weird beliefs. I thought if you knew the measurements of the old temple, you'd know more than if you understood gravity. Alfred Russel Wallace, who did most of Darwin's work for him, was a spiritualist, would go to table rapping sessions, listening to burblings from the beyond. Joseph Priestley was a Unitarian and believed in the phlogiston theory.
Shouldn't that be a
It's really only until, I would say it's only until Albert Einstein, not until, I mean, Albert Einstein, that you get a scientist who's also essentially a philosopher of pure mind. That's the great breakthrough. And now you can have private beliefs and be a scientific person, but no one says my science